All right, guys, good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome. Next week we have one presentation, which is Women's History Month, and we've invited the owners of Rowan Tree and the Herndon Rotary Club past presidents. There's several female past presidents, so they'll be coming to accept the proclamation. Next week we have 2 or 3 public hearings, and we'll get started right away. The first one is a resolution to consider special exception number 1901, 767 Monroe Street to increase the number of non-resident persons permitted at a home-based business in a 24-hour period. The applicant is Heather Kepshire, and we have Dave Stromberg for the staff report on this one.
Good evening, Mayor Merkel and members of council. So this will be an application, special exception 19-01, which is, again, for a home-based business located at 767 Monroe Street, as you can see up on the screen. And the request is to expand an existing home-based business. So home-based businesses are a permitted accessory use in the R10 zoning district. And there's a list of standards listed in the ordinance in 78-8.5. And if you meet all those standards, you can be reviewed and approved administratively. And so this applicant has gone through that process in 2016. She's been operating the home-based business since that time, has not had any complaints or anything like that in the system. But the ordinance does limit it to a maximum of 4 non-resident individuals in any 24-hour period. And the applicant is looking to expand that business to allow up to a total of 7 non-resident individuals in a 24-hour period. And so that also does include, you can have up to 1 employee who doesn't actually live at the house, work at a home-based business, but that's included in your total for that 24-hour period. So the town council can expand those provisions for home-based businesses through the special exception process. So the property has a parking area that's capable to hold up to 3 vehicles at any one time. And the property has a shared driveway with 765 Monroe Street. When this property was developed, it came off of that other existing parcel. So there's a shared access easement agreement that covers that portion that gets from the parking area to this Monroe Street. The current owners of 765 Monroe have submitted a letter stating that they have no objections, they've never had any problem with the current home-based business, and they didn't have any problems with the expansion. The applicant typically does a single chair type use, so it's just one person in there, and it's usually one after another. It's not a large salon where you have a lot of other people, and she's the only kind of stylist there. The other employee is a part-time assistant. So this did go to the Planning Commission last month, and they recommended approval with the staff conditions. We do have a condition limiting the total number of non-resident vehicles at any one time to 2 vehicles on the property. And we're also recommending a condition that limits the hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So there are no evening appointments and there are no weekend appointments. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, questions for staff?
So do your recommendations include if the property next door, 765, changes hands, is there any kind of, do they have to come back for another special exception request?
No, only if the current property owner for 767, where the home-based business actually is, if that changes ownership, then anyone new would have to come in for a new special exception. But if the adjacent property owners were to move, that wouldn't be included.
Okay, maybe if there was a problem. And I watched the Planning Commission. Obviously, there's been no issues at all with that business. However, if the next door neighbors didn't like shared, because they have a shared driveway?
Well, the shared driveway, that has to be shared, that's a recorded easement, so that always has to be there. And the conditions do limit the parking to be on site, so they couldn't park in that shared part of the driveway.
Okay.
It actually has to be on the parking pad of this property, so they couldn't just park right there on the shared part, that's only for access.
Other questions or comments? So there are 3 parking spaces there, and we're saying 2 non-resident cars is all that we would allow. So that should accommodate, because obviously the homeowner lives there, and her
Right.
part-time assistant, and potentially 1 customer would still be accommodated without a problem. Cool. Jen?
The change from 4 to 7, so when she first applied for the license, just had requested 4, and now that's the reason for the change, just,
The business is growing, so just having a total of 4 plus the assistant, I mean, so if the assistant's there, it's really only 3 clients per day. And because she doesn't do weekend or night appointments, it just to try and grow a little bit, it's a little bit limiting.
but that, right. It was more just, she essentially had requested that originally, and so this is just a simple request of as the business changes. So it wasn't something we imposed.
Oh,
is what I
correct,
mean.
yeah, the ordinance for any home-based business, other than a daycare, limits it to 4.
And, oh, I see, limits it to 4. So if she had asked for, she could ask for 7, or she could have requested this to be potentially 10 today.
Potentially.
Okay, but 7
But more than
obviously
4 requires a special exception.
Yes, anything more than 4
Right, okay,
requires
got it.
special
Okay.
exception.
Sheila, did you have a question too?
Yes, I believe it said somewhere in here that they were not allowed to put signage up.
Right, home-based businesses aren't permitted to have signage.
Okay, and what do we consider a sign? Does that have to be a freestanding in the yard, or is that something posted
Either one
on
would
the
be a
door
sign.
or the windows? So nothing.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Next up is ordinance to consider ZODA number 1806 to amend Chapter 78 zoning, plan development districts, several sections listed here to make housekeeping changes for internal consistency. And that's Dave once again.
All right. So yes, this is an 18-06, and this is just part of our ongoing process to correct errors and eliminate out-of-date provisions in the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is a fluid document, and like anything, it needs to be maintained, so old provisions need to be taken out. Sometimes mistakes can happen in the past, and you find them later and go through and correct them. So this ZODA has 3 minor corrections that we're going to go through and make. And so the first section is in section 78-50.7, and this is our plan development traditional downtown district. So this is really just fixing a mistake by deleting a portion of a sentence that somehow we think got in there during the reorganization of all the chapters of the zoning ordinance. And this sentence deals with floor area ratio. And floor area ratio is a method of regulating density. It's really just a calculation of the square footage of all floors of a building divided by the area of the parcel. And that sentence says that if you want to increase your floor area ratio, you have to go before the Heritage Preservation Review Board. The problem is that this zoning district does not regulate density using floor area ratio. So you don't get any type of bonus by going in front of the Heritage Preservation Review Board. And you have to do that just as part of the process anyway. So it's getting rid of that language that's saying you could get a bonus. Again, it's just not applicable because you're not using floor area ratio in that district. So it's really just clarifying and striking that language out, but you will still have to go in front of the HPRB for any development in the zoning district. So the next section is eating establishments, which is in 7871.6. And this section of the ordinance is where it goes through and describes our various use groups. And a number of these do need some updating. In this one, it's specifically looking at eating establishments. And we used to regulate outdoor seating as an accessory use to restaurants, and we would, for anything 25 seats or fewer, we really didn't have any standards for it, and then for a while, anything over just wasn't permitted, and then at one time it was permitted with a special exception. Then a few years ago, we did a zoning ordinance amendment that just had a set of standard requirements that any outdoor seating, regardless of the size, is required to abide by to make sure that it's not having any negative impacts. And then for outdoor seating areas over 32 seats, you are required to either demonstrate that you have enough parking for it or actually construct more parking on your site in order to accommodate that. So that's been in effect for a few years, but there's a phrase in the ordinance that said outdoor seating with 25 seats or fewer that was located in multiple different sections of the zoning ordinance, and not every one of those was caught back then, so now we're just going through and catching the rest of them and just striking that little section of 25 seats or fewer and striking that out.
Did you have something, Sheila?
Yeah. So this means if they have 25 or fewer, they're okay?
Yeah, you can have an outdoor seating area of really any size, and you still have, it has to be clear of any pedestrian walkways. You can't have any equipment out there. Everything has to be fenced in, but if you're gonna go over 32 seats, then you have to demonstrate that you are meeting all your additional parking requirements that are gonna be driven by that.
Okay.
We don't actually, not that I found within town limits, have any outdoor seating areas of over 32. But that could change in the future.
Okay.
And then the last section is 78-110.2, and this is planting standards for landscaping. And this section really regulates all development and redevelopment that occurs in the town. And part of the reason we're changing this is just because it doesn't reflect our current procedures. And so we obviously want the ordinance and our procedures to line up perfectly together. So anytime you are doing development or redevelopment, you have to go through an administrative site plan review process. And we have a whole list of various standards that you have to do for landscaping, for what you have to plant, and you also are required to remove any invasive species that could be on the site at the time. And part of that is through, again, the site plan review, and then we were gonna go out and inspect the site to make sure it complies with that site plan. We used to do that with a zoning inspection permit, what we would just call a ZIP. But now we really tie that to an occupancy permit or the bonding that you do with your site plan. That seems to work a lot better to really make sure that people are going through and following in accordance with their approved site plan. And one of the things that did change a little bit since the initiating is we wanted to beef up the language to just make it very clear that any invasive species does need to be removed. That came up at the town council work session when this was initiated. So we did go and make some changes just to make it very clear that no matter what you do, have to remove those invasive species. Any questions on any of these?
Questions or comments on these changes? Anybody? Sadie?
Do we have a list of invasive species? I know that this is not about that, but I mean, is there a place that people can go to just get a list?
Yeah, I can have our community forester. He's the one who reviews all that, and I can get a list from him and show you where it's located on the website and all of that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next up is an ordinance to consider granting a third franchise agreement to the Program Executive Office Enterprise Information Systems Project with Manager Defense Communications and Army Transmission Systems Technology Applications Office. Wow, formerly the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Wow, why'd they change that? For the abandonment of existing routes. Yeah, right. there must be a great acronym in there that we're missing. And so this is for the abandonment of existing routes resulting in town ownership and control of this conduit, the addition of a new route, and the adjustment of some franchise fees. I'll recognize our town attorney who'll go over the bid process. And I do want to give you guys a heads up that this will require a roll call vote next week. Madam Town
That's about all there is to it.
Oh, is that it?
There
Sorry.
will be, next week the mayor will call for bids. We expect to only have one bid from Army Corps. Sorry, I'm not going to try all the names.
I'll practice it before next week.
And then following the presentation by Tammy and any comment by the applicant, there will be a roll call vote. Pretty quickly.
Tammy, you have
All right.
something for us?
Yeah, so this is the third franchise amendment. I will say the exhibit is probably the best look at what they're doing here. As you can see, this is where we have two projects coming in as well. The Van Buren Street project, so this will be moving their conduit in coordination with that, as well as over here on Spring Street, they'll be abandoning a portion and moving that as well to
And I will say, for those of you that have been here, maybe for the last couple of abandonments we've done, we do not anticipate, we anticipate because of the need for the relocation that this will not be any sort of conduit that we will entertain a future bid for
Okay.
anytime soon.
Okay. Are there questions or comments on this one? Sheila?
Just I like your little color-coded brown.
Oh,
Yeah,
very
very
nice.
nice.
What got taken out?
That's what, yeah.
Yeah, it's
They were
really
very
easy to
thorough, which I
follow.
like, yeah.
Yeah, did Sierra do that?
No.
It was very well done. Other questions? Thank you. That finally brings us to the last public hearing, which is a resolution to consider comprehensive plan amendment number 1802 to amend the Town of Herndon 2030 comp plan to establish a design concept for street improvements on South Elton Street between Sterling Road and Herndon Parkway, and incorporate by reference the design concept from our consultants. And I will call on Michael Wallach with staff report. He's already there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. So tonight we're here to discuss CPA 1802, design concept for street improvements on Eldon Street between Sterling Road and Herndon Parkway. So this is a separate yet related initiative to the South Eldon Small Area Plan. This is strictly the roadway plan. So the location map. The study area is Eldon Street between Herndon Parkway, left side of the screen there, and Sterling Road on the right side. It also includes the intersection of Eldon Street and Alabama Drive. So some background, in 2017, the town applied for and was awarded a $65,000 grant through the state. And the reason we did this was to understand any transportation needs associated with potential changes to land uses along Eldon Street between Herndon Parkway and Sterling Road. And it's also an opportunity to prepare for and implement any multimodal design along this corridor. There's a grant oversight committee that was comprised of Sidney Friedrichs from Town Council and Michael Romeo on Planning Commission, along with town staff and a traffic consultant. We held a number of meetings last year and developed a concept plan for this section of Eldon Street. So we had a initiating resolution approved by Town Council at its November 13, 2018 public hearing to authorize public hearings on this item. And the Planning Commission approved the resolution recommending adoption of CPA 1802 at its January 28, 2019 public hearing. And the resolution recommends amendment to the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan, page 9-8, projects listed to achieve proposed major street network with a planning horizon of 2030. And under terms of the grant, the town must adopt the grant-funded roadway concept by October 1st, 2019, or repay the grant funds back to the state. So here's the language, proposed comprehensive plan language, and I'll read this out. South Eldon Street, Town Minor Arterial, Herndon Parkway to Sterling Road. Add a shared use path of 8 feet in width and improve the existing 5-lane section to be a 4-lane section with 11-foot wide travel lanes and a raised median and protected turning lanes. To increase visibility and safety, pedestrian crossings, enhanced crosswalks are to be added at the intersections of Eldon Street and Alabama Drive, the intersection at Dulles Park Shopping Center, and the intersection of Eldon Street and Sterling Road. The 8-foot wide shared use path is to be located on the western side of Eldon Street and is to run from Sterling Road to Herndon Parkway. So these last 4 slides here will actually get into the concept plan that was developed by the Grant Oversight Committee. This first section here, well, I guess first of all what I'll do here is down at the bottom there is the existing condition of this portion of Eldon Street. This is the area of Eldon Street and Herndon Parkway. The top portion is the concept plan, and then notes on the concept plan are at the lower left-hand side of the screen there. So I'll read off the list there of the notes on the proposed improvements. Reducing the length of pedestrian crossing and making it perpendicular to the direction of the street is what we have for the intersection there. Adding a pedestrian refuge area in the median, adding bus stop shelters at existing bus stops, adding a raised median to reduce conflicting traffic movements, and widening the existing 5-foot sidewalk to 8 feet. And this allows for better condition and better mixing by pedestrians and bicyclists, and also updating all crosswalks, ramps, and pedestrian signals for compliance with ADA. And as part of the concept plan, we do propose that a few driveway curb cuts will be closed off and some will be consolidated. And I'll kind of go through the ones that are located here. If you go to number 4 here, this is the first one. The concept plan calls for closing off that driveway curb cut, and it's the one nearest the intersection of Eldon Street and Herndon Parkway. So this is in front of 1100 Herndon Parkway near the Bank of America and the Chipotle. And the reason the Grant Oversight Committee ended up picking this one was due to the proximity to the intersection. And then represented by number 5, there's 2 of them. I'll point them out here. We've got one on the west side, one on the east side of Eldon Street here. The committee decided that both of these were good candidates for consolidation. So in the existing condition, you can see it here. There's 2 driveway curb cuts on the west side and 2 on the east side. Both of those are only about 25 feet apart, maybe 30 feet apart. And what the committee came up with is that this would be a good opportunity for consolidation and kind of reconfiguring the entrances. So on the west side, you would have the area near Starbucks and Verizon, Virginia. And then on the east side is the area of the PNC Bank and then also the Amphora. And one other thing too, this kind of thing can only work if the 2 property owners agree to such a condition. So it's not like the town can really enforce any kind of consolidation here. So moving on to the next sheet here, this is the area of Eldon Street and Alabama Drive. The improvements are really much of the same thing that I listed off before. We're going from 5-foot sidewalk to an 8-foot shared use path. This is an opportunity to improve the visibility of the intersection and be in compliance with ADA here at this intersection. The raised median continues. And then one of the other driveway curb cuts is outlined by number 3. This is with the Gulf gas station. So again, it's the one nearest the intersection. There's other access points for this gas station on Eldon and Alabama Drive. So moving on here, this slide shows Eldon Street near Dulles Park Shopping Center. And as noted in the staff report, this project calls for an improved pedestrian crosswalk at this intersection with Dulles Park Shopping Center. And part of this is the committee realized that there's a need for a safe pedestrian crossing on Eldon Street in the vicinity of Herndon Middle School. And so this gets us pretty close. There's a path that kind of on the right side there runs along to Herndon Middle School. But due to unmet traffic signal warrants at this, what would be a new intersection, signalized intersection, the warrants weren't met as part of this project to have this be in signalized intersections. So that would be pursued through a separate project. The other effort that the committee came up with was eventually improving the sidewalk on the eastern side of Eldon Street along here. You may note that really the western side is what is going to be expanded from 5 to 8 feet. There's a lot more right-of-way on that side to work with. But we realize on the eastern side, a separate effort could be just improving that sidewalk. We may not be able to widen it, but the committee realized the east side should also be improved. I'm sorry, let me go back here. So the last driveway curb cut that the committee realized we should close off here would be represented by number 1. Currently this is right in, right out, and the committee felt like if we have a signalized intersection here, then that kind of solves the problem, and we can close off another curb cut. And also, represented by number 8 up there, extending that right turn lane would then also be possible in that area. And again, the improvements, much of the same. We would try to make this a fairly visible intersection, more visible crosswalks. The median continues. And finally, this is the area of Eldon Street and Sterling Road. The improvements would terminate at this intersection, and they would continue on here. So much of the same, going from 5-foot sidewalk to 8-foot shared use path, ensuring we've got ADA compliance at this intersection, and making some of the crosswalks more perpendicular to the intersection, which is another safer condition for pedestrians. And with that, I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Cesar?
Thank you. Slide number 6, just curious because I love this little thing on item number 5. It's hard to tell from the slide, the little pork chop. Is that still there?
Where is that?
Number 5.
Number 5.
It looks like it's there. I just
No.
assume it'd be gone.
It's flat.
Okay,
It used to be raised and it is now flat. I
Right.
remember the pork chop here.
right.
I know, we used
I
to be a
was in
little
the
pork
audience.
chop crazy back
Right.
in the day.
My
That one
question
was in
is
the audience.
that still there or is that flattened over, like really flattened over?
What is that?
That's going into the Starbucks, right?
Oh,
You know what I mean?
right, right, yeah.
Coming out of Amphora, you can only go right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, sorry, I was in the wrong.
So I'm asking, will people be able to go straight or left?
That they won't be able to. This
Have to go.
Okay. All right.
they can make a left into the site, but not a left out of the site.
Okay.
Sydney?
So my understanding is that, from quite a few months ago, that all of the consolidations of entrances were to increase safety, and that safety was the main reason that VDOT would possibly fund this. So if we can't get the landowners to allow us to consolidate, is there any danger that I know we're already having problems with that, but is there any danger that VDOT wouldn't want to fund this? Was there a number that they wanted us to consolidate to, or?
I don't believe so. The consolidation was really the committee's recommendation. I would say at first this is really to satisfy a grant. That's probably the first thing that we have to do. VDOT may view this separately once it gets to the funding application stage.
Okay, so
There's no magic number there. They're
Yeah.
not looking for a particular number. They're just looking at overall scoring. And so it might, not so much because the curb cuts were closed, but overall efficiency may not be quite as good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we would be able to get both.
So we might be able to do something else, or maybe they'd still like it the way it is, okay. So what do you mean when you say the warrants weren't met?
So VDOT, anytime a new signalized intersection is put in, it's gotta be warranted. So it's gotta be,
Traffic counts.
yeah, traffic counts, people have to be using an intersection for it to warrant traffic signal. Same with the stop sign.
Okay.
If you go to like four-way stop, that has to also be warranted.
There's actually a list of items, including fatalities, accidents, fatalities, and other experiences, delays, and if you don't do enough of those, then they won't support it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions on this? Sydney, you got to live through this twice.
Well, and I love it, so I don't mind.
Great. Other questions, anyone? Okay, thank you very much. We have one consent agenda item, which is just reappointing members to the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. If there are any questions or comments on that one. Okay. Then that brings us to our discussion items, which we have several. The first one is about revenue projections for the budget. I will recognize our budget manager, John Casella, to brief council on revenue projections as we move into the budget cycle.
And if you have antidepressants, I suggest you take them down.
Oh dear.
Oh, good.
Well, we've all had our budget meetings, I think, so I don't think we're going to be totally shocked.
Any money for those?
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity.
That's right.
Glass half full, I love it.
All right, well, my goal this year is to try to get through this without drop kicking the keyboard across the room.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I did it twice.
Was that a whole year ago? That was so fun. It kept us awake.
Yeah.
So there's
So obviously, we've had a chance as part of the budget already to sit down and do our preliminary conversation, so you already have kind of a flavor of what lies ahead, but tonight we'll get into a little bit more detail. So the major themes we're going to look at regarding our revenue trends. This year, in past years, we had done year-to-date numbers, things like meals tax or transient occupancy. We're in the process of doing a munis implementation on our revenue module, and so not only are we still in process of implementing that, but the methodology being used to book the revenue is a little different. So what would happen is it would look like we're really understating the revenue. So I didn't put that in this year. So basically, we're looking more at annual trends, so that other piece won't be here this year. And then, of course, we'll look at the projection for the FY 2020 budget. Again, major themes. A lot of these are themes that you've seen before. Excise taxes are doing similar things in general. There are some variances there, the notable one being VPOL, but overall they're following similar trends that they followed in the past. Obviously VPOL's down 1.5 million. That's at least a preliminary number. We're still looking at that. I guess my understanding is going to take a few months to flush that out. But as it stands now, we went from 1.5 million to basically $60. Which is quite a hit. Fortunately, the hit to the budget is $400,000, which that sounds odd to say, but in the past we've gone over multiple times this idea of volatility and how we try to protect ourselves from that. And so historically we haven't budgeted the BPOL number at its maximum level. We've kind of left a buffer there based on some of the larger contributors to that revenue. So we have a way of kind of sizing that up. In recent years, we have been trying to bump that budget up because the actual to budget ratio has been getting much larger, and so unfortunately now we're going to take a $400K hit on that, but again, it could have been a lot worse. So fortunately, we were being conservative with that. The annual increase in property tax is probably about $475,000. Unfortunately, the $400,000 kind of negates a bunch of that. The good news is that the past couple of years, it appears that property tax valuation growth is on the rise. So you can see the average for the period that I'm utilizing in this presentation is about $240K. So this number is significantly above that. But even in property tax, we have some volatility. So like between 15 and 16, we made $60,000 year over year. And so, you know, again, it depends, although at least it seems like we're on the upswing right now. Important recurring revenue, again, we try to differentiate between recurring revenue and one-time revenue. Very important, because obviously you don't want to have a one-time revenue being used to pay for something that's going to continue to cost you money in the future. These particular categories are recurring revenues. Obviously, property tax is the single largest tax at about 34.5%. You can see that in FY 2009, the split was essentially even between commercial and residential. You can also see that now that has shifted to being more weighted toward the residential side, which obviously rooftops cost money. So when you start going in that direction, it potentially could have more of an impact on your budget. The other local taxes category, other local taxes being those local taxes other than property taxes, is about 37.1%. This is a relatively large listing of taxes. Transient lodging is in there, B-polls in there, our local sales tax receipts are in there, and meals tax. Those are some of the larger revenues in there, but there are others, but those are the big ones. Parks and recreation fees at 8%, obviously a significant number, and it's in our charge for services category. And of course, intergovernmental revenue at 12.6% is also a relatively large revenue stream for us. Communication sales and use tax and the VDOT highway maintenance monies tend to be the largest in there. One, unfortunately, is going down while the other is going up, which tends to be kind of the theme in our revenue streams. I use the word meandering because we don't seem to be able to hit it all in the right direction at one time. You know, we get some going up and some going down. So as we look forward, I'm just going to go over a couple of the larger revenues and just give you a flavor of what we kind of look at. Essentially, you know, we're trying to look at annual trends year over year. We're trying to look at year to date, year over year, to get a sense of obviously how we've done in the past and then how we're doing this year to see if trends are continuing or things are changing. So we have 6% tax on hotel and motel room rates. The average increase over the period has been 1.9%. We actually had a pretty good bump in 18, which actually exceeded our projection. So 17 over 18 was actually at 4%. However, because of external shocks like sequestration, things like recessions, transient occupancy tends to be a bit of a more volatile revenue than, say, something like meals tax. So again, you can see the average is 1.9, but the 1 year over year is at 4. So basically what I did is projected off of the 18 actual and was kind of middle ground at 2.6%. So that's about 40K per year, year over year for the 2-year period. So 80K over the FY18 actual. And again, here you can see the trend over time. Actuals in black, budget is the white, and then the black and white at the end is our projection. And again, it doesn't jump out at you, but you kind of see that it kind of meanders a little bit in the beginning, and then it went up, and our budget number is down. So essentially, I've kind of trended that so that our projection for next year incorporates the higher rate that came in at 18. Meals tax is 2.5%, and again, this is a flat percentage on meals and prepared foods. We average about 2.5% growth in that annually, which is about $50,000 a year. And our budget number was right on, so again, I just did a 50K increase over the FY19 budget number for FY20. And again, you can see here where you get a very nice kind of trend line in an upward direction. So at least in recent years, it's been a relatively stable revenue in terms of growth. State allocations, you have the 2 main revenues in there, and of course there are others, but street and highway maintenance funds, and then communication sales and use tax. VDOT sends us a reimbursement based on lane miles, primary versus secondary. There's formulas they use to apply different rates to those lane miles, and we get reimbursed quarterly. Recently, this number's been growing pretty well, so we've been doing well on this revenue. Communication sales and use became effective for us January 1, 2007 in the sense that it replaced other local taxes that we had at the time with a state tax, and essentially has been on a downhill trend ever since. The tax is assessed on telecommunication activity, and what's happening is that the nature of that industry is changing, so those items to which the tax was applied are falling in disuse, and things like streaming and so on that are growing in use are not part of that taxable income. So here you see VDOT, street maintenance. Again, we've had about 4% growth over the period, and I used that growth rate to increase our projection to 2.11 million. So a substantial amount of money. Again, communication and sales tax, 10.7% decline over the period, about $188,000 loss. And in fact, my 19 budgeted projection was slightly below 18, made some adjustments, so it's a 2.25% increase over the 18 actuals over a 2-year period, which will mean we'll lose about $70,000 projected between 19 and 20. That may actually be a little aggressive, and maybe more like 50. We may be able to adjust that a little bit. And again, it's due to the changes in the technology base to which that tax is applied. This slide is an interesting slide because it highlights an issue that we have with this idea of how we trend and kind of the volatility and our margins being fairly narrow. So you can see in 2017 there's a spike, obviously, in the revenue. Well, that spike was due to a nearly $400,000 one-time VDOT grant. So again, if you start projecting off that number, you're going in the wrong direction. So this is really a very good example of being careful in how we trend those things, because we get these one-offs that will fall into the general fund, and because our year-over-year growth in the total general fund is relatively small, these numbers can really jump out at you. And of course, the projection is down. The main reason is that we've done some different things with the way that we book the revenue. So there's some stormwater management revenue that was fairly substantial that we used to put into the general fund. We're now booking that directly into the CIP, and that's probably around a $300,000 hit. And again, when your margins are small, it's gonna have an impact. Property tax, they're appraised at 100% of market value. Current rate is 26.5 cents. It's been that since FY12, at which point the 26.75 was in place and was reduced to 26.5. We're looking at about a 4.6% growth based on preliminary numbers from the county and valuations. The increase in the property tax would be equal to $451,000 basically for every penny. Last year that number was $432,000, so you can see that it's a relatively significant increase. This slide I find interesting in the sense that in 2009, your valuations were actually higher than they are today. Now back in 2009, your rate was 24 cents per $100, and now we raised it, but you can see the post-recession, as that bubble popped and the valuations dropped, what council did through that period was they tended to raise the rate to try to recover some of that revenue loss. And then as we've gotten into 2015-16, we've had a fairly constant rate, and then our valuations have kind of gone up and down a little bit, but again, in recent times, they're starting to jump out, and you can see that at the end of that trend.
Yeah, I believe the rate has been the same since 2011, if I'm not mistaken, the property tax rate.
Okay.
I don't think it's gone up or down since then.
Okay.
So.
All right. And then B-Poll, obviously, unfortunately, this year we took a big hit. It is a license tax on businesses, and then that tax depends a lot on gross receipts. So depending, once you reach a certain threshold, we start to apply different rates as you go up and up in your gross receipts. It is the largest single tax in the other local tax category, and the growth has been shifting. Well, the way that it grows is through shifts. So because it's reliant on, it's not like sales tax where you may have hundreds of thousands of transactions over time. You have a fairly limited pool of people. The N is relatively small, so what'll happen is you will get a bump if there's a new entrant into the market, and then it'll remain relatively flat for a period of time, and then it'll jump again, and you'll see that in the chart on the next page. We usually get our receipts at the beginning of March, so we don't really know right now how we're doing other than the Amazon number. And again, the loss was 1.5 million in actuals, but $400,000 in terms of our budget. And so here you can see where you get that kind of jump. Someone came into the market in 17. You get a little bit of growth in 18. Now, you can see the 4.6 million. That's us being conservative, right? That's us always kind of looking at that gap between budget and actual and being careful that if someone were to leave, we don't get hit for the full shot. Well, that day has arrived. So this year's budget, we put 4.6 million as a number, and then next year, that $400,000 loss gets you to 4.2 million. So total general fund recurring revenues, $220,500, 0.6% projected budget to budget. Property tax valuations are on the rise, so we are getting, thank God, we got a bit of a bump this year with that. But again, this kind of theme that appears is this kind of relatively low growth rate where you kind of get this meandering around a mean. There are some revenues that buck that trend, like meals tax, which tend to grow fairly steadily, but a lot of them will go up and down. And what happens is they tend to offset one another, so it has an impact on the total revenue stream for the general fund. Obviously, the B poll decline was essentially offset by the property tax revenue. And so here you see our actual revenue over time, recurring revenue total for the general fund, 2019 budget down slightly, and that's a result of that B poll gap that we see, and then just a very slight bump up in the 2020 projection number. That's it.
All right.
Questions?
Questions, comments, observations? Anybody? Sydney?
What is PSC and what are elderly refunds?
PSC is the Public Service Corporation, so when we do our property tax, they treat them separately. So basically what you'll get another $300,000, not in addition to, but as a line item, and the growth in that may be 3% per year or thereabouts. So it's simply another portion of the tax. For whatever reason, we break that out, the county breaks that out, and maybe because they're public service corporations, they are a special category, but they add a little bit more revenue to the pool. And then the other one was the refund question?
The elderly refund.
Yeah, we have a program where elderly get a tax break, and that amounts to probably about $100,000 a year we get back.
That's good to know. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Cesar?
Thank you. The property tax went down from 2.2675 to 0.2650. What year was that?
I believe it was in FY12, but
I think you're correct.
I can research it.
I think it was FY12.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say it was 12. Were there any increases outside of that since?
I believe in 12 we also raised the meals tax, and that generated about an $800,000 bump. It was a 1% increase to what was a 1.5% tax at that time.
But nothing else?
Nothing else.
Okay, thank you.
Did we also look at like cigarette tax and some of those things at one point, but I don't recall if we
We
changed them,
still-
but it's been years ago.
We still have a cigarette tax.
We do, it's 75 cents per pack.
Right.
Okay.
It's just a small amount of
And,
revenue,
yeah,
right?
the
Is that
revenue
issue
is under
with it?
$100,000.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think, well, no, I think it's.
No, it's over, but if we made an adjustment.
Oh, yeah, I think a quarter would get you about
75,
90,000.
yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Pretty?
So if we go back to 2012, the property tax, right now it's 0.2650 and
That's
it was
correct.
0.2675, right?
Yeah.
If we go back to 2012, how much bump in our revenue would that create?
Well, you get about $470,000 per penny. So,
120.
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be some portion of that. But remember also that the valuations are different now. So you would, if you were looking at increases, you would say, every penny today would get you about $470,000. That's what would impact you today. And then, again, if you broke that down into something less than that, you could obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that increase is because of the rise in the property value, but also at the same time, if we go back to 2012, then that would also increase a little bit. I'm just asking a question only,
Right,
just to figure
right.
out things.
Well, it's a relationship, right? There's the valuation,
True.
there's the rate,
Uh-huh.
and the levy.
And both.
So one of the things that we have to do is, based on state law, is that if valuation drives a certain amount, we actually have to post a notice whether our rate changes or not, because your revenues are going up by an amount deemed by the state to be the equivalent of a tax increase. So there's those three portions. There's the valuation, there's the rate, and there's the levy. Obviously, what we control is the rate, and in times past, as those valuations dropped, the council offset the loss of revenue by increasing the rate.
And for the meal tax, so we have 2.5%, so if we go up by, again, a question, by 1%, that will bring
About
about
$900,000.
$1 million, right?
Yeah.
About
Yeah, give or
$900,000.
take. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Or comments? Yes, sir.
Back to meals tax for a second. I had heard that there's issues collecting that. Is that the case, or am I hearing you?
It's a voluntary compliance. We give the restaurateur 6% to tally it up, take their time, account for it, remit in a timely fashion in order, yes, on time or early, to recoup the 6% back to them.
So hang on, let me double click on it. So
Sure.
if I pay my taxes early, do I get a 6%?
Yes.
Yes.
The meals tax.
The meals tax.
No.
Not
Just
other
meals
No,
taxes.
no.
Let me ask the question a different way.
Sure.
If I pay my taxes early,
Mhm.
in general, do I get a discount?
No.
So help me understand why we give that to the businesses.
It's just so that, because they have to account for it on our behalf, and we don't have an auditing portion of our operation to go out and do that for them.
And that burden is valued at 6%.
That is what it's valued at. And
Okay.
different jurisdictions have different values. It's somewhere in the realm of where
So
those-
we're giving them a discount for doing what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Arguably, yes,
Why are we doing that?
to get voluntary compliance.
It's not voluntary to pay your taxes.
True.
So if it is, tell me, and I can make a decision.
No, it's certainly not.
So I guess,
Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to understand the logic on giving away 6% when we really shouldn't be giving away 6% for doing what people are supposed to be doing.
It is just something that's always been baked into meals taxes throughout the state.
I'm
so
going
we
to
can-
suggest we unbake that.
Okay.
I'm kind of curious. So, thank you.
No, no worries.
And let's talk about the money though, how much money that is, because it's not, we've talked about that before, this 6%.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Do all jurisdictions do that?
Uh,
Or is it
Everyone
strange
that
that
I'm
we do it?
aware of, but we can certainly do an analysis for you. That's pretty easy.
Well, and again, if we're going to have that discussion, I want to be clear that Herndon's different, in my humble opinion, from other municipalities. We're having an increase in growth. We've got metro. We've got demands on our services. I'm not sure we're like any other town that I know. So I think although it's good to compare processes and best practices, I just don't think we can. It's a false equivalent in my mind to say, well, they do it, therefore it should be okay that we do it.
And that's true, but I'd like to give you that information just so you have a
I appreciate that.
point of comparison.
I appreciate that. But I just want to make sure before we look at things like, property tax, that we're not giving away and bleeding dollars where we shouldn't.
Now, that being said, one of the other things as we discussed in all the budget meetings is we're hoping if we can get the county to collect our real estate taxes, to take our tax supervisor, revenue supervisor, and put them on auditing these things. So I think there is some money to be had out there if
I'm
we
sure
start
there
auditing.
is.
Oh, yeah. But the problem is, right now, it's unknown. Much like when we put the parking enforcement officer on the streets, we didn't know how bad the problem was until he paid for himself and then some in the process.
Okay.
So we're looking to do the same.
So it's been somewhat of a staffing issue, like we just don't have the bandwidth to have an auditor full-time out chasing meals tax.
Right, and
So
again,
It's a different approach.
Yes, and since it's an unknown, it was hard to say, let's get an auditor in here, and then if they turn up $10,000, we're, negative $90,000 on paying for an
Right.
auditor. So we wanted to use internal resources to just kind of test the water, see where that tolerance lies, and try to get some more data to determine how.
Well, and we talked about a risk management kind of position that for multiple issues in town that we,
Right.
doesn't look like we have the budget for, but certainly something we
Right.
should be trying to make happen. Is there anybody that hasn't
Can I
had?
continue on that topic?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did research the 6% last year, because I know this came up, Beth Meyer had brought this up, so I researched and had asked Jenny Tripoli about it. Couple things she mentioned, one, it wasn't a big dollar amount, I can look through my email and figure out what it was, because this was
It was about $150,000.
for the 6%.
It's a police officer.
And the other thing that was discussed was the fact that when we were the ones that implemented this, the rest of Fairfax County didn't have it, and it was intended to sort of soften the blow to our businesses, because although taxes are required, it is also a new tax that we were asking, and really the burden is on the businesses to calculate, et cetera. So that's why that 6%, right, was determined. I certainly think it's worth discussing whether we still want to offer that incentive. Maybe we offer less. Maybe we up kind of what our get is. But I think there was a little more to the 6%.
Is there anybody that hasn't commented yet that would like to comment on this? Now I can't keep track of who's talked, so pretty.
Just to continue what Councilmember De La Guerra and Baker said, so 2.5% is coming around 2.5 million, 2.3 million. So let's say hypothetically, if everybody pays taxes in advance and we're giving 6% rebate, right? That comes around 150,000 because 6% off, but that's like if everybody pays in advance, that's 150,000.
Right.
Plus, there might be, we are losing because of lack of audit and everything, there might be another 100, 200,000 we're losing because you never know, right? So
And there are
keeping
some
all
known
these
that
things
we are
into
aware haven't
consideration,
paid.
there might be like 300, 400, $500,000 revenue that is on the table, but we're not taking it. And having somebody to audit may cost $70,000, $80,000, so maybe we have to consider that.
Well, the audit piece though is what we're trying to get by, once we offload to Fairfax County, right?
The
That's
trick here is we can't
potentially what we're
outsource
trying
it.
to
It
do.
has to be by law, it has to be a town or Herndon employee doing the audits. That's all it was, so we have to have a full-time employee doing it. So at that
Right, but
point,
once,
that's,
right.
They have to be full-time?
I believe so.
They don't have to be full-time.
They have
just
to be an employee.
of the
Can't be a
town.
contractor.
So that means we can assign that added role to somebody else.
Once we free up their time with the
Right.
Fairfax County piece is what I was getting at, yeah.
Yes.
The other thing you have to remember too is that as you initiate that program and you begin to do those audits, the rate of return will drop over time as you obviously ensure more compliance.
Right.
Bill?
I think another realization too, in our discussions that CD and I had with staff is fees that are collected, for example, DPW, I believe, if you have DPW collect refuge, for example, it's $35, but if you, let's say, dump something and it gets sent back to you, that same fine is $35. So there's an inequality in regards to doing it properly versus not having it. So I do think that, you know, some of those things we could have some revenues that we didn't realize based upon those projections as well.
We will be here in March to discuss the refuse and recycling fees, and that is a topic of conversation. That was one of the things that jumped off at us when we were looking at it.
Other comments or questions about the state of revenue?
Comments, the meeting I had with the staff was excellent. He answered all my questions.
It's one of my favorite. What exactly is the sales tax that we collect? Is that just the cigarettes, or is there something else? that
No,
we
sales tax is, it's based on school-age populations, and it's a redistribution relative to everyone else in the county. So the numbers are remitted, and then there's a percentage that then gets remitted back to us.
So it's a county?
No, it's the state sales tax.
It's a state
It's the
sales
state
tax?
sales
Yeah, we get a
tax.
portion of it back.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Jim?
Yep, I was just gonna comment, I know we talked about, again, we keep saying the budget is really tight, and I know it feels like there's a little bit of vibe in the last couple work sessions of whether this is the year we do have to look at some taxes. During my budget meeting, I know we talked about property tax, and just a reminder that the Fairfax County, of course, raised all of our taxes last year. And so that might be a painful bump for us to look at that, right? So I think meals tax does feel, if we do decide we need to raise taxes, that does feel like the logical place, since there is a good amount of dollars you get with that. It's also not totally a burden on the residents, right? You get a lot of outsiders that also carry that burden. And the rest of the taxes, you just don't see the same level of impact with, just given the size of what we bring in. So that's kind of where my head is at right now on some of the potentials for those.
As of Thursday, Brian Hill is not intending to raise real estate taxes this year, or ask for that, so.
Okay. Or meals taxes? They
Well, we don't have
They don't
one.
have it.
Fairfax County doesn't have one.
They tried.
Well, they can't do it without, yeah.
So, I just want to make a comment on Jen's. I agree about the real estate tax. We've already had some citizens misinterpret the increase in
Evaluation.
Yeah, an evaluation for an increase in our budget, which I tried to tamp down, but I hope people will recognize that that's not us doing anything, it's just the way the value of their property is. But I did have spoken with a lot of citizens who are retired or older and can't really afford too much of a raise in property taxes, so I'm somewhat concerned. Any other comments? Great, thank you. Next
Thanks,
up,
John.
Yes, thank you, Jim. I'll recognize, where are we? Oh, the town manager for an update on downtown redevelopment.
Sure. First, before we go on, hopefully in 2 weeks, we'll be back to you with a budget and balance that we'll be able to talk about where we want to go with taxation for the advertising deadlines later on in the month. So,
Great.
So we'll hopefully schedule a discussion item for hopefully 2 weeks is what our goal is right now. Comstock, I had a really nice meeting with the Comstock project manager earlier today. The site plan is still upstairs being reviewed. We're still within our window of getting the review done. It is the fourth submission of the site plan, and we've gone from 200 and some comments down to just a handful that we're working through right now. Hopefully we can get that wrapped up soon. Once they do, Mr. Sponi indicated that they intend to file back for the HPRB, the 3 certificates of appropriateness. We'll come back as soon as the site plan is ready to go. We talked today about financial elements associated with Art Center relocation, and we think we've come to where we should be looking at from a financial perspective. And he is going to go back to his higher-ups and work that out, and hopefully come back to Arch Herndon and give them some good news soon. I can't say when, it's on his plate. So that's where we are right now. We cannot do anything until we have an approved site plan. And then the HPRB process will then start. Right now, Comstock is working diligently. Like I said, a very productive meeting with Mr. Saponi and I earlier today. And we're just going to hopefully have some good news about the site plan in the next several weeks.
Questions or comments? Anybody? Could we, in our comments at the public hearing each time, just say that, even if the news is the same, as people are asking, wanting
That's
an
fine.
update, and they just want to know that things are still happening, so
That's
is that
fine.
okay?
Absolutely.
That would be great.
I will
And there were
gladly do
quite a
that.
few people elated that you brought that up the last
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, once
so-
we got the fourth submission in, and part of it, and I apologize personally, I was distracted personally, and I hadn't really been engaging that closely with Comstock, between the budget and other things going on in my life. And I had just gotten re-engaged back with them, and we were able, then the site plan had come in, and then questions that were answered. I was in a speculative mode until we got that last iteration of the site plan in. Now things are picking up, so.
Awesome. Any comments or questions?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. It's good news. So next up, I will recognize the town attorney to begin discussion on our code of ethics. Madam Town Attorney.
Thank you. Vanna over here. She's not tall enough. Sitting in the chair.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So, at the beginning of January, I think, council at their first work session had a discussion, and some items were mentioned, bannered about what you all wanted to address this year or as soon as possible. One of the things that was mentioned was looking at our current ethics ordinance, what's known as our ethics ordinance. And a request was made for me to bring forth some information regarding that subject. So, what I have here tonight is a general overview of how local governing bodies govern themselves. I'm going to give you all the tools that you have available, what we currently have, what other jurisdictions do generally, and then let you ask questions about that. So, there are several sources of authority for how governing bodies can govern themselves. The most primary of which being the Code of Virginia. Section 15.2, 1400 tells us the governing bodies may fine or punish a member of their own for disorderly behavior. You may ask what disorderly behavior is. It is a violation of the rules, whatever they may be. It may be as simple as acting out in a meeting, or it may be as specific as not abiding by some sort of rule regarding procedure or policy. Section 2.2, 3103, you cannot use, a public officer cannot use the public office to retaliate or threaten to retaliate for an individual expressing their views. Both individuals, their colleagues, as well as individuals addressing the public body. Section 24.2, 231, forfeiture of office by a person sentenced for commission of certain crimes. That is the code section that addresses what happens when you get convicted of a felony or a crime for which you have to register. I think we know that that's typically sexual crimes. Section 24.2, 233, removal of elected and certain appointed officers by courts. That is the process by which the citizen petition can be presented to the circuit courts to have an individual removed, and then the court would remove. There is no, unlike federal and state, there is no provision in the Code of Virginia that permits any sort of removal of a public officer like impeachment. No, nothing like that. The other source of authority is special authority. Our charter tells us that the town council shall establish its own rules of order and procedure, which this town council has multiple rules of order and procedure, and may take appropriate action against its own members and other persons for violations thereof. That is a pretty general statement. Some charters are more specific. Some charters even provide that individuals can be removed. For instance, those are Alexandria, Blacksburg, Lynchburg, and Richmond has one of the most well-known. Another special authority are that local governing bodies can adopt as their own rules governing conduct or behavior. We have going backward. These rules typically tend to be philosophical or prescriptive. Philosophical meaning we all believe certain things. We believe that members should be honest. We believe that members should be candid. We believe that members should adhere to certain principles. Prescriptive means prohibitive. A member shall not X, Y, or Z. Or a combination of both, which is the most typical situation. For not all governing bodies have rules. Even in this day and age, rules of conduct, ethics ordinances, probably about 2/3 local governing bodies in the Commonwealth have those. I don't know the rest of the country. Our special authority is the ordinance that was adopted in 2015, which addresses several items. Code of ethics for members of town council and council-appointed boards and commission members. Specifies that members of town council and appointed boards and commission members are expected to do the very best of their abilities, demonstrate integrity, honesty, and ethical behavior in the pursuance of town business. Members of town council and appointed boards and commissions, also it talks about behavior towards staff and others. Item number C talks about individuals, how to bring concerns forward, as well as who to bring them to regarding each other, regarding town employees, and although you're already under an obligation, if you are a local governing body official or a board or commission, to abide by the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act and the Conflicts of Interest Act, it is in writing here as well. There's inherent authority. This is typically a line of case law that presents the argument that just by being a local governing body or a public body, you inherently have the right to govern yourselves. And Robert's Rules has a whole chapter on disciplinary procedures, which mirrors what is typically available to throughout the country regarding censure and fines and other procedures. Discipline and penalties. The most common form of discipline or penalty for a board member, council member, is censure. This is the entire body usually entering into a resolution censuring an individual's behavior, be it for something that is stated in an ethical rule or in some other guidance. Fines, typically fines are and should be put into a code or an ordinance. There are no fines stated in the Code of Virginia. There are no fines stated in our current ethical ordinance. And there is question legally whether fines are appropriate, although I would argue that under the current charter it's rather broad. Removal from committees. That is a penalty that a board or a council could take, is to remove an individual from certain committee assignments. Removal from a meeting. This would be due to a person's behavior. Our current state code says that you can be disciplined, a member can be disciplined for disorderly behavior. For instance, I guess an example could be some sort of statement, some sort of disorder that violates the rules of conduct or the meeting rules. This gets a little dicey when you get down to removing somebody physically, and probably not a road that one would want to go down. Removal from office. Now, you remember I said there's no impeachment, there's nothing in the codes that I presented to you from the state. This is only if it's authorized by state code or charter. Removal from office under state code provisions is by petition or conviction and exhaust of all your appeal rights, or charter. Now the charter, as I mentioned, some localities have charters that provide a process for removal from office. However, I would caution that there has never been a legal challenge to that, whether that charter provision is in fact lawful, but we don't have one. All right. That's a very brief summary of what's out there. The codes, ordinances, policies run the gambit. We have a very, I believe, broad and inclusive ordinance currently. Whatever changes you might want to make or whatever questions you have about changes, happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions for the town attorney? Cindy?
Thanks, Lisa. One of the things that always bothers me when I'm looking for something to be defined is when the word is used in the definition. So where we're talking about a code of ethics, it says that,
What page are you on?
I'm on slide 6.
Okay.
Under Town Code Section 2-5, letter A, which makes me very happy to actually be able to say that because I get the opportunity. It says that we shall do the best, we, council and council-appointed board members, shall do the best to their abilities and demonstrate integrity, honesty, and ethical behavior and conduct. If it's a code of ethics, it doesn't define what ethical behavior is. It assumes a pre-agreed upon philosophical approach, and I think we need to define that, honestly, at least in less broad terms.
Yeah, it would certainly be different for different councils, perhaps. So I think we can agree to certain general definitions of ethics, and we can certainly include them. But it may have been different for different, what one would want to include in the definition.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, you could, define it as you would, based upon the case-by-case basis of the behavior. But certainly, if a definition, so you'd like to see some definitions.
Well, at the very least, not saying our code of ethics means behave ethically.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Ethics means X, Y, Z.
Right. And I think the terms that are used before then, the integrity, honesty, and integrity and honesty are part of that, but perhaps we could be more specific. And I also don't see any discussion of social media, which is another hairy thing that has come up and is very hard to.
Some things are addressed in your handbook, and other resolutions and policies that have been adopted and included in the handbook. And it can be, certainly can be something that is, like I said, some councils and boards have pages of guidelines and policies. Would you want me to bring forward what we currently have and put that, incorporate that into?
Maybe. I was specifically thinking of the I guess it's a town of Amherst or a city of Amherst that has a fairly explicit code of conduct. And it did run to several pages, but it was very reassuring to look at it and go, okay, well, this is what is considered important. So I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at that.
Amherst specifically?
Amherst specifically. I thought I know that, but I must not have. It's a very good code of conduct, and I think it might be a nice thing for us all to look at and kind of. I mean, I don't know if everybody agrees with me on that it should be more specific, but I'm uncomfortable with the general fuzziness of this. Anyway, that's my comment.
Other comments? Bree?
Thank you for sharing that. So my concern is also, especially we are in a position that we say something and it may have positive and negative impact, especially when we are using social media these days. So if we can have something in place for using social media, and that actually Councilmember Frederick's already stated, so I'm not gonna go with that again. But the second thing is, sometimes I don't see anything there, especially handling the confidential information. Because intentionally or sometimes unintentionally also that can happen. And if we have something in place, related to confidential information, that would also do it. Thank you.
So I guess my question would be, what would you want to have in place? as a
Sure, but.
But
I think
also,
we have to
and
discuss.
we keep saying, we need something in place about social media. Well, we would decide what that is, so I think we need suggestions on that.
Okay, so we can bring in social media.
Who else? Zeta?
Oh, I was just
Oh,
gonna
yeah, okay.
say, the idea is we draft something, someone own it, one of you own it, or I can own it, whoever wants to own it, and come up with something that we can review and submit to staff. Certainly have legal review.
Make sure it's legal.
Yeah. But I mean, let's own it, let's provide what we think would work, let's not wait, because I think the social element, that's huge, especially as an elected official. I've witnessed, in some cases, not necessarily here, but there are people that like to pick and choose what happens, and then they tend to target. And I think one of the things I saw there was, I wrote it down, the retaliation portion, that could certainly be stretched to a lot of behaviors.
Yes, one person's free speech is another person's attack.
That's why you.
Or one person's attack is another person's free speech. And that is where a lot of case law comes out of, so.
Right, but as an elected official, we have a different standard, I think. And just
So
to be
maybe,
mindful of it.
should we come up with different possibilities and give it to the town attorney, or should we bring it to a work session? What's the ideal decision?
I think we have to figure out, what are we trying to accomplish here? And is it a discussion we need to draft together, or is it suggestions we want to send to the staff? I mean, there's a ton of ways to approach it.
Well, I think a concern that I've heard for many years, ever since text messaging and emails have been rampant, is the concern of meetings going on separately while a meeting's going on. And I know before I got on council, that was a big concern. And I recall members of the public passing notes to people on the council, and it's like,
It's a public
Sure.
meeting,
yeah,
it's supposed to be
it's
public.
right, public meeting, and
Mhm.
people are having conversations separate. So those things are issues, and I know we, since I've been on the council, did have to address one of our council members saying, I guess you could say, derogatory things about staff, and that, that is totally inappropriate. And I saw that prior to my being on the council.
You mean in a meeting or at all?
Well, both. But yes, it was at a meeting and
Yeah.
prior, but I witnessed council members prior to my being on that would just be horrible to staff members, and I don't know why anybody would stay and work for our town. I mean, that's just not a good place to be if you're an employee, a dedicated public servant, and you're being attacked at meetings by council members. And things like that, I think, should be most definitely in the code of conduct. And I'm sure, if you get a whole new body and they want to do that to people, they'll just throw that out and not have any code of conduct that would be reasonable.
Well, I'd be happy to share with everybody I'll share it with the town attorney, and if she could send it out to all of us, the Amherst one, which I just thought was very good. I mean, I'm sure there are others out there that are better, but I liked it. It had lots of information, and we can go through and go, no, this doesn't work for us, or this does. And maybe draft our own, or come up with our own ideas and bring them back to the next work session. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
I had a question, I'm trying to remember what it was. Does anybody else have a comment or a question while we're trying to find it? No? Okay, I don't want to spend the next, all of the terms that I serve looking for ways to point out bad behavior of my colleagues, but I certainly have no problem with having a code of ethics with more specifics and I don't know, are we looking to attach, she talked about fines and things like that? I mean, I think that we're seeing that there can be some pretty egregious behavior or alleged behavior and people aren't removed from office. So I don't know that we'll be able to accomplish much with that.
So I'll just throw out my pet peeve.
Okay.
I've been very clear on this. I think it's more the behavior that you talked about. It's not necessarily for me to punish council. It's more to be accountable to people that voted us in. I personally don't like having my cell phone out texting while I'm in a meeting. While I'm here, you have my full undivided attention. I understand there are emergencies, and God, I certainly want to be aware of this, but when we're here, when a public hearing, you will never see me texting. And I just think that's a standard that I think people expect when you're in a business situation. If you're texting in one of my meetings, you're out the door. And that's what I tell my folks. I mean, when you're here, be here, and then we move on. So for me, that's a pet peeve. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but it's that kind of level of behavior. I think we just need to raise the bar. I will never go to staff for anything. I think it's completely inappropriate for a council member to address staff or pick on them or make them feel uncomfortable or.
Except for the staff.
You're the only one we can get from here, but we have a process for that. We decide, we go to the mayor, and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that. I don't think we're, at least for me, I'm not looking to fine people or.
Yeah, well, I didn't think so, but I want to just like throw it out there and say, because there are places to do.
You're going with it. I think this is a good
Just
thing.
it gives you something to look at and go, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, pretty.
Yeah, the reason, we're talking about this, in my opinion, is especially, the big things like the social media. Most of the controversies and everything happening is due to use of social media, and another is confidential information. If we do not have something in place and something unforeseen happens tomorrow, then we may not have a solid ground to take action, and we might have to say because of ambiguous thing we cannot make the decision and all those kind of things. That's why it's always better to be safe than sorry. So when we are talking about this, it's not about blaming each other or somebody is doing something, but it's more about being safe in future if something unforeseen happens. Because I can only ensure that I may not do that, but sometimes unintentionally also it may happen. So if something is in place, then that would be
Yeah, we can go look
best
at
thing. That's why.
But does our code of ethics right now, it says that if there's an
Yes.
issue, that the whole body should come together and talk about it. Is that
Yes,
correct?
it addresses how issues with staff should be covered. It addresses how issues regarding each other should be addressed. It addresses how, in other words, anything regarding employees goes to the manager.
Right.
Anything regarding council or council, appointees is for council to discuss. You are a family that solves your own problems. And celebrates your successes. I will say this, that the Freedom of Information Act covers confidential information very specifically. And I have been reading it since it was adopted, the 80s, 90s, whatever, and it still requires, to make you feel better, going back and reading it again, but we are required, or we are charged with knowing it. So it's in there. However, it would certainly help everyone to have more than less regarding that. And hopefully, it sounds like we're endeavoring to an educational route as opposed to a punitive route. That, so more, and to make a point, for those that don't know this, prior to December of 2015, Herndon did not have any guidance on rules of conduct or behavior at all. So this is a start. And it's just that start.
It's a nice start.
Is it possible to, like you said, that the confidentiality piece is covered in FOIA, is it possible to simply reference that in our code instead of reinventing the wheel, because that document, the FOIA document changes year to year as
Right.
things change, so then we don't have to keep updating
Well,
our
we do
code.
say
I think
fully
it is.
comply with FOIA, but that's probably not enough. I mean, that's
Okay.
kind of a,
That's assuming we all know
Pedestrian
FOIA
statement.
inside and out, every
yes.
page, right?
Yes, I would think that to specifically pull out the confidentiality sections regarding closed meetings, et cetera, would be a good thing. There's also more robust, other localities have more robust treatments of that, if that's what's desired. We can
I
certainly
think
find
that,
examples.
I'm getting the sense, and over time I've gotten the sense that releasing information from closed sessions, when and if that happens, that's a major concern of the body. Am I hearing that?
Sure.
Is that?
It is
a
one of
piece?
one of the areas of litigation.
And it's also, no matter how many times I hear it, I'm always learning something new. When I was chatting
Yeah.
with you the other day, you said you can't even discuss the subject of the closed meeting, and I went, yeah,
Right.
so, you know, despite the fact that
And
you
that would be
told
the
me 43
unintentional
times, right.
way,
If it's
yeah.
right there in plain English, not in ordinance language, you know, then it's easier to sort of remember and, you know.
Well, it's a
you know,
little nuanced. It's not quite as severe as the subject can ever be, you know, but
Yeah.
it is very nuanced, yes. And certainly, please, if there's any questions, please ask me, call me, come by, whatever. I might not have thought of your perspective on that.
Yeah, whenever, I asked the town attorney about this today, that when we get an agenda that comes out and it says closed section under this code section, it doesn't have the subject, like you said, definitely call the town attorney and ask what that is, because it's not ever gonna be published out there, because
Well,
that.
there's a general subject, but it is
Well, a
not
general
going
subject,
to
but
tell
not, we're
you-
talking about parcel B specifically, because then
Yes.
that sort of gives away to the public what we're talking about, which is, in these
Goes
very
against the
narrow
purpose.
circumstances, why we have to have the closed sessions. I wanted to comment on the text message thing. I know that there have been council members in the past who have texted pretty much the whole time they were on the dais, and I agree that that is not ideal. And if you go to NVRC, the whole table is just texting the entire time. It's really distracting. I had to chair that meeting once. But there will be times that my phone is out because I have a family at home that may need me, and that's, you know, I know that's what you're talking about. It's different. So I just
I
want to.
give my phone to Vicky. If these people call, come grab me.
Well, but I don't, town attorney?
I would be careful avoiding making an employee do a task like that or be a witness. Just be careful about
Shouldn't
that.
do
So
that.
maybe some putting it
That's
in the
me.
center of the
That's just me.
table.
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna do that, but anyway. And
And
I
my
al-
point with that was, everything we do is foiable. So if someone thinks I'm talking to you guys
Yeah,
through text message, that is foible, correct?
They could ask for that to
Well,
the
if we're talking to
extent
each other
that
in a
it's a
text
record
message,
that
sure.
exists, that
Well-
they can reach. It's not, you guys don't have,
They can
town
request it.
phones, to the extent that that's considered a public record. We certainly have to look at it, that's right.
I was told it's foible, so, sorry.
and my last thing I wanted to say is, we are not Congress with 435 people from all over who don't know each other. We are neighbors. I think we should be able to talk to each other. I know that there are personal histories. That's one of the hardest things about this job, I think, is once the campaign is a totally different animal than once you're elected. And once you're elected, we're here to govern, and the campaign should be left behind. And we've talked about this with every council. It's not new to this one. So I would just implore us to talk to each other, because I really think that sometimes there are misunderstandings and things that are unintended consequences, or things come out the wrong way, because we're all humans. And I think we're all here because we care about the town, we want to do what's right, and we're not going to always agree, but I don't think anybody is questioning the value of having an ethics policy that's a little more specific and helps keep us, in line and remind us of what we're supposed to be doing. But my door is always open, and I hope that you'll call me if I tick you off, and I will call you if you bother me. So I think that we could solve a lot of issues if we just talk to each other.
And I hope that we will talk to each other when we're not in meetings, because otherwise, if we only talk when we're at a work session and a public hearing, we're not gonna get much we're not gonna get a quality product.
I agree.
Does
Sheila and I
that-
have solved the world's problems on our taxes in
No one else
Thank
agreed.
you. Thank you for solving all our problems.
So, what are our steps forward? I want to make sure that we're clear on what we've decided
Well,
to do.
I had heard
Okay.
that individual council members were going to find what they like
Okay.
and bring it back to another work session for discussion, was what I heard. Not to me, I'm fine with getting a copy of it as well, but I certainly
Do
don't want to
we-
substitute my judgment for yours.
Well, is it possible for us to gather things and send it either to Lisa or the town clerk so that someone has a packet and we're not all, because I know how we'll miss emails and things, we can get a packet that here's all the things that were turned in.
How about both?
To you and to the
Yes,
town
because
clerk?
I'm gonna have to comment on it and look at it
Okay.
anyway, so
Sure.
that would
Okay.
give me.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
So, and do we want to aim to, in 2 weeks, come back, or do we want to give it a month so that there's time to gather? What was the council think?
I think the sooner the better, because it
Okay.
tends to fall off my plate if I let it go too long.
Okay.
Fine with that.
And then if we get here in 2 weeks and people aren't ready, then we can punt it another 2 weeks. Okay, so if you have things that you like, send it to Vicki and to Lisa Yates, and they will make sure we have it for the next work session. All right?
Sounds good.
Sounds good?
Sounds
All right.
Thank you for doing this. I
And
appreciate it.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that we amend our agenda tonight
Okay,
and add a work session, closed meeting
okay. At the end of
at the end of our roundtable.
Okay, do we need the whole motion for what it would be about, or do we just need to discuss to vote on whether or not to amend the agenda?
Well, the first vote you would need to take on is amending the agenda. And then.
Okay. And we were coming to roundtable, that's why she jumped on right there. So there's a motion on the floor to amend the agenda to add a closed session at the conclusion of the current agenda.
Second.
Okay, made by Ms. Bolam, seconded by Mr. Del Aguila. Okay, discussion on the motion?
And this is just gonna be for.
This is just whether or not we will
consensus.
amend the agenda. Okay, any discussion? Okay, I will say I have a little bit of pause in springing a closed session that hasn't been advertised, but I do understand the reason behind this discussion. So is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of amending the agenda?
We're not voting. It's just
We are?
consensus. It's just
Oh, it's just
consensus.
consensus. Oh, well, then never mind. Okay, so there's consensus to amend the agenda. Thank you. I thought we were. Now we'll go to roundtable. Sheila, you want to kick us off?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, who wants to go first for roundtable? Sydney.
Okay. I always like to go first because I have a short memory and I can only retain things for so long. Let's see. You already actually addressed my main question, which was when there's a closed session planned, I don't think you addressed it completely, but I would like to know right away. And I'd like to know what the subject is. And I know that on Fridays, we get this agenda, and it says on there. I would appreciate it, I assume that the decision isn't made that we're gonna have a closed meeting that, right before that goes out. So if
Well, it
you
just
all are
depends on when it
chatting,
comes up,
yeah,
yeah.
if you all are chatting and you decide, I don't know who decides,
It's usually between Lisa
And
and
ultimately
if
me.
things are bubbling up.
that there's gonna be a
yeah.
closed session, because it's hard for me to make a decision as quickly as I've needed to in closed sessions recently. And I would like a little more time to think about the issues.
We would not be able to share contents of any closed session prior to the session actually occurring. I'm not so sure because we would be giving you information that would not be given to the other members. I'm not really sure what you're asking. If you want to know what the subject matter is?
Well, actually, what I like, I discussed this with a couple of other council members about it, just because we're trying to figure out how to do things well. I like it if we each got a phone call on the day that you decided that we needed a closed session and said, we're gonna have a closed session, this is what it's about. I know you can't talk to us in groups you can't send us all an email at the same time, right? Or can you?
No.
No, you can't. So I would appreciate, unless there's some reason why we can't know ahead of time what's gonna be happening in a closed session. Is there a
if I could
reason?
talk with you, consider that the propriety of that offline and bring that back to council. And perhaps if you can, so you want a phone call
Mhm.
describing exactly what the closed session is to be about.
Because if I arrive.
No, I'm
yeah,
asking if
that's what I
that's
would
what
like,
you're-
yes, yeah. And I would like everybody to
Like
get
the
it.
subject.
The subject, yeah, why we're having a closed meeting.
And
A really
Answer
easy
questions.
example of this is, we've got a vacancy on one of our boards or commissions, and nobody's had any heads up, and you show up, and maybe there's some other people out there that we could recommend, but nobody comes prepared. And so then you're gonna need to have 2 closed sessions to discuss appointments. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, and in general,
Yes.
what ends up happening is that we're like, well, we have these names in front of us, so let's just, I'd really, I don't think we actually do that, but I'd really like some heads up, just so that I can be more prepared. I'm not trying to cause any trouble, I'm just,
well,
I
and
would like
on
to
the-
be able
and
to make a good decision.
I'll certainly, like I said,
We'll
research
talk
the
about it.
propriety of that, but in the meantime, if that were to happen, and I know what the closed meeting is about, which I should, certainly any council member can ask me, give me a call on the Friday, which we release it publicly,
Right.
for a short description of that.
But
And
here's
then
what might
in the
happen,
alternative.
if I'm away for the weekend and I think, I'll read it all on Sunday night and I'll be ready and I'll have all my day Monday to read it, but it's something that needs more time than that, if you called me and said, or if anybody called me and said, we're gonna have a closed session on Friday, I just wanted to remind you to look at your agenda.
But the details aren't in the agenda.
Right.
So I guess my question would be, you're gonna look into the proprietary nature of it, which I don't think I understand.
Propriety.
For like, what's prior?
Sorry, that word.
Legality.
That was
Why, how is that different from sending out anything else under attorney-client privilege? The subject matter, and apparently there is some difference, but I don't think we understand
There may not
it.
be, depending on what it is.
Okay.
There may not be, depending on what it is. And that may be the answer to your question,
Yeah.
which, like you, I'm unprepared to answer that question right here. I'm not afraid to say that. But there may not be. Do you want a attorney-client privileged memorandum preceding each council meeting, closed session?
I would love that, if that was an option. It would just be helpful.
I mean, it may not
'Cause I
be
don't wanna
possible in
yeah.
every situation.
Right.
It may not cover everything. It may not, typically closed meetings are for limited, not typically, they are for limited specific subjects that are prescribed by the Code of Virginia.
Right, but,
But I think what you're
All
saying
I'm
is if
saying
it
is,
says a
yeah.
real estate transaction that would,
yeah.
that provision, you want to know, we're talking about selling buying the Pine Shopping Center, or
Right.
whatever it is.
So
Wouldn't
I
that be
think-
nice if that's
yeah.
what it was?
That would be my favorite.
Or like, it has been the metro station or downtown or that, is that the level of detail
Yeah.
that you want? Just like, what is the issue we're talking about?
Yeah, so I can prepare and think about it.
Or so-and-so resigned from the planning commission, and we gotta replace them,
Something like that.
because they left town.
A little
I mean,
more
serious.
flexibility, but keep us out of trouble.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want you to do anything that's not right,
And
but
actually
it would help
maybe
me.
a further discussion of all of the, not all of them, but the typical exemptions. I mean, we can do that in a open session.
Yeah.
What the options are, they're pretty limited.
Yeah.
And then specifics underneath that. Okay.
That's all? That's all. Okay, who wants to go next? Bill?
Just wanted to reiterate what Vice Mayor Olin said in regards to our meetings with staff on the budget. They went really well. Sydney and I had a really good discussion. I want to thank the town manager for laying out the the foundation, if you will, before we go into it, just so we know the ground rules. And just, it was really good, so appreciate it. So I'll let you know that. That's all.
Okay. Pretty.
Just few updates. Like I shared last time, I was going to the International Meditation Day proclamation. It went really well. And actually, our Senator Boysko, Delegate John Bell, and Loudoun County Chair Phyllis Randall was also there. So, and it was very good, very informative, and we actually did about 5 minutes of meditation, and that was really recharging. So I was thinking, you know, if we can do something in our town as well to bring meditation or, you know, proclaim or whatever it is, so that, you know, people, because spiritual and mental health is very important. So, you know, if the town recognizes that, that would be awesome. Another one is one of our constituents actually sent me this, so I'm just, you know, sharing it with everybody because I think I need it. This one is, there is a webinar on leadership from DaleCarnegie.com, and I'm a big fan of Dale Carnegie. That book, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People, is one of the best I've read, even though I'm still applying that, but there is so much to learn, all right? So there is a webinar, and especially in a position that we are, sometimes you know, it may be fruitful for us also, because you know, you will always learn something new, and I look forward to that. So the topic is disagree agreeably. So that one is coming.
Why did
so.
you think to tell us about that?
Somebody shared that with me, so I thought if somebody is sharing with me, I would share with the council. That's
Do you
all.
have a link or something you could send out to us?
Yeah, I can, but I think it costs money, so
Yeah.
I don't know how much.
May decide
Yes,
to do it.
yes, yes, absolutely. And the third one is, remember last work session, actually Madam Mayor asked about if there is anything we can do to Nepalese American community, because they're just coming along, and right? So I discussed with the community, invited a few people, and about 20 people show up in the library. And I shared this news to them, and they were very happy. They were very thrilled. And you know, I asked them, so which day do you recommend, you know, to do some kind of proclamation? And they said, oh, you can decide, you know, whatever works. But more than that, they were happy that they were already talking about how can we contribute more to the town of Herndon. And they were already brainstorming, and one person was saying, let's feed the hungry people, and another person was saying, let's do cleanup program, let's go and clean the parks and everything. And that actually gave me, you know, a kind of epiphany, because the people coming from different part of the world, I think first thing they always look for is their identity, recognition, and once you get the identity and recognition, the second thing is always contribution. So they always want to do more for the place that recognizes them, right? So I feel like, you know, there are so many other communities, and we can always recognize them, empower them, and when we do that, they will be willing to do more for our town. So that example I saw there, and I felt like, wow, I think this will be a great start, because we can recognize other communities, and they will come out and they get empowered, and you know, they will do more. You know, so first you give and then receive, right? So that's epiphany I got, and I really recommend council to not just the Nepalese community, but even if we start with the Nepalese community, we can go and do for the other community as well, especially the Hispanic community, like 30+% maybe we can do, or maybe it's already in place if I don't know.
No, that's
you
right.
know.
We have
Yeah.
recognized Hispanic Heritage Month in the past,
Okay.
but, and I think that we plan to again.
Yeah.
But I certainly would, maybe we can get together, I would love to find a meaningful day or event or some, you know, something that's
Yeah.
meaningful to the Nepalese community to.
Yeah, for the
to
Nepalese,
recognize.
you know, we thought about, you know, there is a new year which happens around April, May, the Nepalese New Year, and they were telling me, can you do that maybe a weekend, maybe like first weekend or second weekend or third weekend of April or May, The reason they were saying that is because we can organize some program and be happy and enjoy, right, and invite more people, and I think that's a good way to do it, so, yeah.
Sure, so we can always
Yeah.
do a proclamation at a town council meeting and/or sign the proclamation and take it to whatever event is taking place. We've done it both ways, so let's definitely talk. That's exciting.
All right,
Thank you.
that's all I have. You're welcome.
Great, who's next? Cesar?
Thank you. I received an email from a resident on Pearl Street, I think, so that's being looked at, or?
We set,
we all
we
got that.
set our stormwater management throughout the
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
And we can give you a preliminary report.
No, I just want to know if someone's on it.
Yep.
Okay, good. And the one thing I do want to bring up again, I kind of sat back and thought about it for, is the whole proclamation process. I'd like an agreement that we put some process to that. I don't think a jump ball scenario is a good thing, so if we're doing it, then we just take turns. And whoever's turn it is, you have the option to maybe give your time to someone else as they're reading it. So let's say it's my turn and you want to do it, and I yield my time to
Well, we talked about this at the last work session, and I had Vicki go back and do some research to see how it had been done. And back to the Tom Rust, Mike O'Reilly, Divinitas days, the mayor assigns the proclamation to whoever is interested in it. And if you request a proclamation for a certain group, of course you would get that one.
No, I got that.
Yeah.
I'm introducing a process for this body. I'd like it to be through some process, and you can go A to Z or 1, 2, 3, but that's my request.
Well, I spoke with Vicki as well, and we talked about how, I know when I first got on the council, it was a rare day that I might get one, because maybe the mayor didn't like me. But
Not this mayor.
That wasn't me.
It wasn't you.
No, I'm just saying, I
And
work,
then-
I can't always be
Right,
online.
and then I found out that, well, you just gotta be jumping on these things, and so that's, if you are out there working and busy, it's kind of hard to do that. So one of the things I mentioned to her, I said, well, what if we sent out a list of what's coming over the next several months? Because usually the staff knows, especially about things that are like Pearl Harbor, that's always gonna be there. We've got some that we're going to have all the time.
We could certainly do
So
that.
if we put those things out and then people can think about them, and then you have an opportunity for people to go, wow, this would be something I really like.
I'm
So,
fine with doing
yeah.
that. I mean, because I don't really care who reads them. I just think that just round robin is like, I want you to read things that are meaningful to you,
Right.
right? Not just because it's your turn and then,
Well, but
I think that
if-
we're creating a problem that's not really here.
I don't think so. I think the
Well, I
process is
disagree.
good. Okay, we can.
That's okay.
We can take a vote. I mean,
Well-
and we can have an agreement.
Well, we had
My-
concurrence of council last week, or 2 weeks ago, that we would continue as we had.
Sorry, I wasn't here. I'd like to bring that up again.
Okay, well.
So, again, because some of us are busy and we don't always get to the emails before anyone else, and I just think that's kind of dysfunctional where you've got people sort of jump balling, scrambling for something that they want. So I think a process is good, and, I'd like to have an agreement to put a process in place, whether it's alphabetical, and if it's something you really want, talk to the person who's next on the rotation. You don't have to be very, stringent with it. If someone wants one, have a talk.
So I don't agree with that either. So I would prefer that I prefer the other model maybe of, I
Of the
agree
list.
that there could be an option for some change. I haven't read one lately either because I often am not like as responsive on email either because I often do it
Well, just to
at
be
the end
clear, I
of the
don't
day.
always just give it to the first person that asks.
I know, but there is something to be said for that you can be responsive and that can
Because I don't
win the
think that's
day.
fair either.
But I like the idea, I think a better compromise is what Sheila suggested of, get a list for 6 months, and then we can all reply, here's ones we like, and then I think you can kind of figure out, based
Yeah.
on that list, so that it is more equitably
What if two people want to do the
divided.
same?
Well, I think.
Well, you could
I
work
think-
it out, or we
yeah.
can split it. We've split them before.
We have a town green.
Fencing match?
For charity. Ron is cringing over. Do it for charity.
Jousting.
I think that if two people wanted the same thing, it's a pretty easy thing to
Split it.
to
Yeah.
split it.
Just
And
split
we've
it.
done that before when
We've
it's a
done that
resolution
before.
and it's really long, when there's a retirement, a lot
yeah.
of times we'll all
Or you
split
can
it.
reply and request a couple of them, and then you can get,
Yeah.
Kind of divvy them up.
I'm fine.
So I can ask the town clerk for the list. I had a list, but I think it's evolving because people request different ones and they change, or sometimes we think we're gonna do one and no one wants to come and pick it up, so we take it
Right.
off the agenda. So I can ask the town clerk to send that out.
Okay.
Does that work?
That's
Works
easy.
for me.
And you don't have to pounce on it, just, we'll put like a date of,
Yeah.
let me know by whatever day, so that it's not a race. Because I don't sit here and refresh my email all day either.
Okay, I was under the impression it's a jump ball, that's why. Someone said it was a jump ball, so.
Wow. I don't think that's really the way it is. So,
Okay, I asked that specific question, and you said, yes, it's a jump ball. That's why I brought it up.
well, like I said, it's a jump
It's in the
ball, but.
audio. I can send you the audio
Okay,
file.
well, that's fine, but I think.
maybe there's a
it's-
different
we're-
interpretation of what the word jump ball means.
Here, everyone grab one. It's jump ball.
If
I'm
there
saying
is a
maybe a
proclamation that
different
anybody at this
interpretation.
table is dying to read, please let me know, because I want you to read it. Is there anything else? Okay. Jen?
And I was gonna mention the Pearl Street, that already got discussed, so no other comments from me.
I was gonna talk about Pearl Street too. We have brought Pearl Street up. And for my colleague,
Which,
if you would like to get a cleanup crew going, hook up with John Verdinski or Friends of Running Mead Park. They will hook you up. John Verdinski frequently will have like a company that wants to do something, and he gets them all ready and puts them in a part of the community.
His last name, I'm sorry.
Cindy?
coordinate that together.
Okay, whether it's the
he's on staff.
WNOD
Oh,
Trail
okay.
or one of our parks.
can with the
It's
town
John
clerk,
Budzinski.
can you connect Councilmember DeCall with John Brzezinski's contact information? Because it's a tricky name to spell, so that way you'll have it
Yeah,
for sure.
the last
He's our town forester.
And then our Arts Herndon, they're always looking for people that want to get involved. You could have like 1 month, your community could say, we're going to go volunteer at Art Space for XYZ, or somewhere else, Friends of Running Mead Park or something else. So we've got plenty of things I can talk to you offline.
And that inspires others, so that will
Exactly.
have a ripple effect.
I think that's great.
Rotary does things, we can drag you with us. There's a lot going on.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, the only thing I wanted to say was that tomorrow, schools are already canceled in Fairfax County and Loudoun County and multiple other places for the weather. I know DCW is on it, probably starting about 3 a.m. And something that is definitely safe for you to put on your social media accounts is that tomorrow, the staff has made the call that we will not be doing recycling pickup tomorrow at all. It will all be on Thursday.
Okay.
So try to let your neighbors
And
know. I know
Thursday
it's-
trash.
Thursday trash goes
Thursday
to Friday.
trash. Oh, so
Okay.
Thursday trash goes to
Yes,
Friday?
Thursday
Just
trash,
bump it back.
because remember, recycling's our heaviest day.
That's
Yeah,
right,
We
that's
really
all
can't
they
take
do.
it.
do it Monday.
So
So
moving it out
Thursday
a
and
couple
Friday
days.
trash is on Friday.
Okay.
Okay, I need to amend what I told my neighbor.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Town Manager, do you have anything for
You're
us?
stealing my thunder. I was
Oh,
gonna
I'm
say,
sorry.
trash recycling and ARB, HPRB, we did talk, we're on.
We're on,
We're on
I
for
mean,
us.
it was my understanding it was going to warm up soon.
Well, the rain is gonna, looks like 3 o'clock in the afternoon is when it switches to rain, so we're hopefully.
As long as it's not
enough.
freezing rain.
Well, freezing rain is earlier. So
Okay.
freezing rain will be
So
precipitating.
you're talking about the meeting tomorrow night is on unless you hear differently.
we know what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
Depends on what channel you look at.
Unless conditions get bad, we're planning to be on. We have a pretty full agenda. We have Aslan on tomorrow. We want to get that moving forward and a few other things, so we don't want to interrupt that. Because of the rain kicking in at 3 o'clock, I'm moving my departure for Stanton back to 3. And I'll leave to go down there after that, and I'll be in Stanton, the Virginia Local Government Managers Association meeting for Thursday and Friday. When I get back, we'll talk, I'll circle back with our stormwater management experts and talk about Pearl Street. One other thing, and it's slipped, it's something I slipped. The guidebook that we provided you at the orientation, there's a page on the guidebook that is a remnant of Williamsburg's model that we modeled this after, and it references a part of the charter that doesn't exist unless you live in Williamsburg. So we are getting an update together for you to resubmit.
They'd all marked it and give it to me and said, this is wrong already.
All right, so there you go. So we will be sending that back out to you
Just an updated
shortly.
version.
Yes,
Okay,
just
cool.
updated version with the Williamsburg language removed.
Are you gonna update the whole thing, or are you
No, no,
just
just
gonna give us
that
that
page.
piece of just?
Well, it's going to send it to you electronically, and you can substitute
Oh,
the
good.
page as you see fit.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't even know
Just,
where
I
my
don't want
paper
one
went
right
now.
now. I have the printed copy, I just don't want a whole nother printed copy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Swap it out.
And,
No pie charts.
and there are no pie charts
Okay,
in
good,
the guidebook.
good, good.
All
Okay,
right, that's all.
don't waste
All right,
paper.
awesome. Okay, so I believe I am entertaining a motion.
Yes.
Vice Mayor.
I move we go into a closed meeting pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 to consult with legal counsel regarding actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiation or litigation posture of the council.
Second. Okay, so we have a motion made by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Mr. McKenna. Discussion on the motion to go into closed session. Madam Town Attorney, do we need any staff to remain?
We do, I asked Ms. Gillerin and Mr. Stromberg to remain.
Sorry, guys. Okay, further discussion on the motion?
Can we have a 4-minute break?
Yeah, we'll have a quick break. So I remain a little concerned that this was not advertised, so I will call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, and I am a no on that. So that passes 6-1. Are you 4-minute break? Not even 5?
Okay, I'll give you 5.
Okay.
Yeah, give us 5, just make sure we get the lights turned off.
Okay.
Just gonna check, I've been resisting and everything.